Hi, this is not end of the road news. This is actually just my views, and so I figured I'd try to say it no less than official capacity as much as possible. Not that there's really any sort of official anything. In fact, that's what this sermon or whatever you want to call it or whatever is about. Anyways, the subject is the issue of authority, and that's pretty much you can think about that expression any way you want, every single way it can be measured, such as the issuance of authority. That's where we're going to start, and we're also going to talk about the conflict that comes with authority. So the first thing is first, we can bitch all day about human rights, dignity, and what the UN says everyone else should have their jails and prisons ran at, what the United States says they're going to do with it. We can bark about it all day, and the problem is that people don't understand their roles, because I don't think anyone does. I don't think Congress understands their roles. They're not even doing their job. They're not following the Constitution. They've undone the Constitution. Right now, in some circles that I follow, the discussions about democracy versus a constitutional republic and which one's better. Neither are really better. It's how fast they fall apart is the real question. Because the reality is there's no good government. In fact, all governments are basically issued because people need to do some form of evil, and it's not okay that one individual person does it. They need a group. So the real reason we have governments is the absolute monopoly on force. Who gets to do what? Who gets to beat the person up because of whatever reason? Resisting arrest, threat of violence, etc., and that's pretty much it. So I'm here to just say simply, here in America, we were very, 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 very sure of ourselves at one point in time that there was no monopoly on force. Everyone had the right to violence under some pretext, and so the issue was, the issue now is that if government is the only one that has the monopoly on force and violence for specific reasons, then how does a common citizen perform an arrest? I mean, isn't that exerting force? And so the answer is no, the government does not have absolute authority and right to do all this shit. And the Second Amendment is pretty sure that that's factual. You have the right to self-defense. You have the right to bear arms. You have a right to a militia, and the reason for that is plainly written. It's for the free state. So if we are free, we have militias. That's pretty much it. That means the right to bear arms and form basically a group for militant cause and action. So that's what they said was freedom, and it certainly is. That basically assures us that the government has no absolute authority, and they sure as shit can't disarm anyone for any practical reason. So we'll get down the line here. Here in the justice system and corrections and all that other shit, we don't follow the Constitution. It's pretty plain. I think we've made that argument over and over and over again, and there's a real problem with our government. Congress doesn't follow the Constitution. They just write unconstitutional laws. And the Supreme Court is not going to be the check on how the Constitution is plainly read. It's just obvious that they can just make some sort of theology. And so, but we're going to get down the line here. These are my beliefs. And I think they're pretty good. If I do say so myself, I think I can argue for the sake of everyone that this is pretty much how it works. The thing is about government, I'm not going to be able to go over all of this in the short amount of time that I have. The thing about government is that you don't have the right to do this or that. The other person now, suddenly they're subject to being pushed around and succumb and detained and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so anyways, the next part is the right to believe. You have the right to believe and speak freely because, a higher authority. And so the thing is, we're going to talk about that higher authority or God or whatever. But the thing is, a lot of people are really, really, really sure. First off, we have to kind of dissuade ourselves a little bit that we know God, because even if you think you know God and you have a personal relationship with said God, it's likely that it's not as, we get down to science and stuff, it's not so likely that you really do know. In fact, in pretty much every Abrahamic religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, there's scriptures that say that, no one really knows God, and that's pretty obvious. So even if you're Christian, you say, no, I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It's like, yeah, well, do some history and some fact checking, and then study, once you find out that there's really no history about Jesus, this subject's called the historicity of Jesus on Jesus, or is Jesus, I don't know. And you're going to find not a lot there. Not a lot. Jesus never wrote anything down. Usually when that happens, people want to tell you that person's really, really real. You have to second guess yourself. In fact, a lot of the Christians use forgeries. You can look up anything that you thought is proof that Jesus is real. Just look up that, Google that, and type in forgery behind it. You're going to see a lot of these are forgeries. In fact, almost all of them. Some might escape me, but either way, either it's revelatory, which means it just someone said, "Oh, I saw Jesus. Jesus came to me," such as Paul or Saul or whatever you want to call him. But most of this is just revelatory, and there's no factual basis or historical basis for any of it. So, hate to upset a lot of people, but that's, it's true. I'm just going to say it's true. You can argue with me all day. You can have a debate, but I'm not here. Just do your own research. So, what we have here now is a bunch of stuff, and we're trying to fling through it real fast. However, I'm a negative theologian. You can look that up. Negative theology simply says that we don't really know God, and that's okay. It's okay to not know God. It doesn't mean you're going to hell or heaven or anything like that. It just simply says we don't know, and that's okay. I'm a big God believer, actually. Been a big God believer my whole life. Maybe it's genetic. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? But for the most part, most of society believes in God, a God. They don't know much about this God, and depending on which cult they get brought into or under, and then start believing whatever, that's typically how their framework in religion, and they have a right to it. So we're going to give them that right, because everyone has the right to believe whatever they want. So that's the first thing. So what am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about morals and values. Everyone has a right to their own, and that's why we have democracy in the first place. It's kind of important. But, we can say, well, democracy never works for very long, blah, blah, blah. Talk about political science aspects of it and histories. We're not going to do that today, simply for sake of time. And then, constitutional anythings, government, only work when, you follow it, and it works. As a science, we have to make sure the government actually does this. And so what's the next role? What's the perfect government? Next question. There is none. Therefore, the perfect government is none. And, it'd be perfect if society just simply adhered to everything and everything was fine and everyone dies, just everything naturally happened. In fact, sometimes it does, but sometimes we have to, punish certain actions or whatever. We're not going to go to such extremes as everything starts citing crimes and punishments. We'll just say that's what the job of the legislative body does, judges used to do this. I don't know why they don't anymore as much, but, hey, I'm a person of authority, and I know the law, therefore I should be held to a higher standard. And that's pretty much the way things ought to be ran. I know it doesn't always happen. It should. So, especially if you have any sort of doctrine or whatever that you follow and you fall out of it, and there's should be some sort of consequence. So maybe not a law, but certainly maybe people pull you out of your church authority or something because you broke your rules or whatever, and you thought you were better. And I don't know. See what I'm saying? Like, let everyone else decide that. So, anyways, what's the problem here? The problem is the government is not a person, and it doesn't actually respect anyone's rights. In fact, if you have a government that says its job is to respect rights, you're going to see that it doesn't. In fact, you look all over the world, and that's pretty much the only commonality between all the governments today. They respect everyone's rights, and that's only when they're there or a citizen, and then they argue it, and then it goes to the courts, and then a judge doesn't see it that way because of whatever, case law or whatever. So the problem here is that people don't know that they have the authority, and it's equal. If you're going to have a government, it should be for the equal equality of law, and justice for all, so to speak, and stuff like that. And that's what makes people equal, on equal footing. And the authority comes from them, but they get it from God, a higher authority. See what I'm saying? And so, but if you don't know God, does that mean like, well, you're a heathen? Well, to some it might, but I don't believe so. So the thing is, we just look at each other, the golden rule, the golden law, whatever you want to call it, the one that Jesus spoke of, whatever. He wasn't the first to actually come up with this, FYI. So, it's been around for a lot longer. The Torah doesn't come up with these laws. They weren't the first people to ever say, thou shalt not kill, So...
You have 1 minute remaining.
Anyways, long story short, the government doesn't have any authority. It doesn't give anyone authority over others, and it sure as shit doesn't have the right to take away your rights or your guns or whatever, or your speech or whatever, like they're trying to do for everybody, not just me. And the thing is, we are people who respect natural rights. The government, if you set up a government to respect natural rights, you're going to have a bad day. It's people that do it. That's the reason why we have a jury pool and stuff like that. It's because, would you want this to happen to you under these circumstances, et cetera, with the evidence presented, blah, 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 arguments. And our courts just aren't set up like that anymore, and there's no real way to get any real justice. So that's why we have to start over. Start thinking with your hats, your thinking caps on, because we're going to get a new government, and you're going to be a part of it. You get to decide all this stuff. But this is just some guidance, because we the people no one can argue this, that we the people.
Thank you for using Global Tel Link.